This is the Bat Flip Podcast. Now here's your host, Damien, David, and Matt.
Hey, everybody, and welcome in to another season preview edition of the Bat Flip Podcast. I'm Matt here today with Damien, and we're going to be talking about Damien's favorite team, the San Francisco Giants. This team is in a weird kind of situation where they've been around a 500 team the last few years here. They have new leadership in their front office now, which is definitely a welcome change for a lot of Giants fans. Yeah, they've made some good additions this offseason. It's going to be an interesting team to watch. So, Damien, I guess we'll start off and just talk about kind of generally where you feel like the Giants are at as a franchise right now.
Yeah, notoriously my favorite team, as we all know here. You can see the shirt here. I can highly recommend getting one of these for yourself. But yeah, I just think the Giants they're in a weird spot. You know, we've talked the past couple off seasons on this podcast that they've really struggled to get people to come to the city of San Francisco. High level free agents that is. But they're in the new dawn of a little bit of a new era now with Buster Posey. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go. You know, I think there's some question marks about like the long term future of most of this team. You know, obviously they have some guys signed long term and some building blocks there, but it's going to be interesting to see where they take like their scouting and the rest of the other stuff with the Buster Posey vision. But if there's anybody that can sell the city of San Francisco and get somebody to come play for the Giants, it's going to be Buster Posey. So
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the whole Buster Posey thing is interesting because, in one hand, he's got this relationship with players. He's got the experience as a player that he can sell to these guys. But on the other hand, he doesn't have a lot of front office experience. He doesn't have a lot of the money experience, that side of things. So, definitely interesting to see how he does. And I think it's been Giants fans are pretty happy with the way this offseason went. They brought in some more closer to star players than they had brought in the past few off seasons. And they also, at the end of last year, after Buster Posey became the leadership there, they re-signed Matt Chapman, which was a big one too. So, but we'll move on and we'll go ahead and talk about all their additions and subtractions this offseason. Start off the big ad, Willie Adames, shortstop. They brought in from the Brewers. He had a very good year last year. Put up like almost 5 WAR. He's an all-star caliber shortstop. Good power bat. The defense is a little bit split in metrics, but I think generally he's viewed as an average to above average shortstop defender. But you combine that with really good power, and you got a really good player. They brought in Justin Verlander. We'll see how that goes. He's 42 years old. There's something there's something to be said that he's had some injuries the last couple of years, so we don't know if it's his age and just him being washed that has knocked off his performance, or if it's that he's been injured and maybe he's healthy now. So it'll be interesting to see if he has one more year in him, where he can at least be a solid rotation piece for them. They brought in Braxton Roxby in a trade. He's a reliever that will provide some depth in the bullpen. Sam Huff they brought in off of waivers. He's a catcher that was once a pretty high level prospect that can help back up Patrick Bailey, and then Oslevis Basabe from the Rays they traded for as well. So, their ads are interesting. So, Damien, I guess, what do you think of their offseason in general? Do you think that they did enough with these ads compared to what you would have kind of expected from Buster Posey in his first offseason?
I think as far as like the expectations for the offseason, I think it's about right. I think they went in, they got a high level player in a guy like Willie Adames, a bigger free agent that they hadn't been able to get before. You probably could have made the argument that maybe they should have got a more, I don't want to say established pitcher than Justin Verlander, but a more solid option that you are just more sure of, right? Like I think there is some real question marks about is Verlander done? Is he cooked? Does he still have something left in the tank? I think we're gonna see. I just think that's a kind of toss up in the air at the moment, which is weird to say about Justin Verlander, but um, I think as far as things can go, though, I mean, you got a everyday shortstop there. You got a veteran for the rotation. You got a really interesting reliever that has some nasty stuff in Roxby there. He does struggle with some command. It's only in the minor league so far, but that and then Sam Huff, like you mentioned, he's a decently rated catcher at one point that could come in and be a backup for Patrick Bailey. I think you could do a lot worse backup catcher options. So I think overall, I think the offseason is about what you could have expected. Now we'll talk about it a little bit later. I'm not sure that that means a whole lot in the grand scheme of it, but I think overall it was a solid first offseason for Buster Posey.
Yeah, definitely agree with a lot of that. So, moving on, their subtractions they've had are Blake Snell, obviously, um, that's a big one. Michael Conforto, he um, he was okay for them for the most part. They both of them signed with the Dodgers, right?
Yeah.
Tyro Estrada is an interesting one. He didn't have a great year in 2024, but that's somebody who has had some good years in the past, so it kind of hurts to lose him, even though you weren't really counting on him to come back and be great this year. He's formerly like a 3.5 win player a couple years ago. Taylor Rogers hurts. He was a good reliever for them, and Blake Sabol, he's not a. I don't think he's that big of a loss for them. But out of these subtractions, which one? I'm obviously Blake Snell probably hurts the worst.
Yeah.
But of the other guys, which one do you think hurts the worst?
I'd say probably just Taylor Rogers, I would assume. Conforto, I think he was solid there, but it's also another thing. Left-handed power bats kind of just struggle at that ballpark, anyways, and they kind of have the breakout of Heliot Ramos. Jung Hoo Lee's coming back. You still have Yastrzemski. Like Conforto just kind of didn't have an everyday place there. Same thing with Estrada. Like signing Willie Adames and Tyler Fitzgerald moving over to second kind of doesn't give Estrada a spot to play. Sable's the backup catcher we talked about, but I think Taylor Rogers. First off, he's not with his brother anymore. That was a cool thing to have, but
Yeah.
he was still a really solid left-handed reliever to go into that bullpen. There's a lot of good left-handed hitters in the National League West. They still could have used him with the question marks around the back end of the bullpen as well. So I would say out of the biggest losses, if you're talking, if we're kind of moving Snell away as like the obvious guy, I really do think it might be Taylor Rogers.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm a fan of Taylor Rogers. I have been for a long time, so that definitely hurts them pretty substantially. But moving on to the position player side of things here, and we'll talk about what they've got going into 2025. Definitely a lineup that's kind of a weird mix here. You've
Yeah.
got some low upside, high floor platoon type guys. I guess kind of left over from that like Gabe Kapler, Farhan Zaidi, like we're gonna mix and match and platoon everybody days. It starts with Lamont Wade at first base. Um, Pretty good hitter. He's gonna get on base a lot, but he's kind of one of those platoony, part-time starter type players.
Yeah.
Then they obviously brought in Willie Adames. Jung Hoo Lee is definitely a key for them this year. Last year, he missed most of the season with injury after coming over from Korea. We didn't know what he was going to be, so I think there's a lot of hype about around him around the Giants, and hopefully him being healthy this year, he can really hammer down center field and also be a solid bat. So we'll see what he's able to do. Matt Chapman obviously is the basically the same player that he's been the last 3 or 4 years. The bat's not quite what we were hoping it would develop into, but it's pretty good still. And the defense is incredible at third base. So he's one of their best players. He had a good year last year too. Then you got more of the. I mean, Helio Ramos is interesting in left field. He had a very solid rookie season last year, but the metrics didn't really like him that much.
Yeah.
So we'll see if he's able to repeat what he did last year. And then you got more of those like platoony type guys like Mike Yastrzemski, Wilmer Flores, Tyler Fitzgerald. They're kind of those Gabe Kapler era players, and then Fitzgerald's younger, but he kind of fits in that mold. And then Patrick Bailey behind the plate is probably the best defensive. I don't say probably. He is the best defensive catcher in baseball, who shows a little bit of upside with the bat. So Damien, I guess we've kind of got a split here. There's like 4 players here that are good and they have really high upsides, and then everyone else who is just kind of like platoony, like we don't know what they're going to be. So I guess out of those 4 players, which one do you think that the four guys that have like a 3+ WAR projection, which one do you think is going to be the biggest key for this team? Which one do you think is going to be the best out of those? And then also out of all those other guys, which one do you think could step up and play play the role of being that kind of breakout guy or career renaissance guy? Which one do you think will be that?
Yeah, so first off, I think the you could say the biggest argument is of what's going to be the biggest thing for this team out of those four guys is just the health of Jung Hoo Lee, and is he able to develop to be the guy people thought or expected him to be. I think you know what you're getting with Matt Chapman and Patrick Bailey, elite defensive guy players who, if they can have with their back, can be above league average. Like, you take it. Adamas, you're gonna know he's gonna play some solid defense. He's gonna hit you what he's gonna hit you. Lee is kind of the real question mark of, is he going to be a league average hitter, because he did struggle in his, like, what, 32 or 30-ish games it was before he got injured. Or is he going to be able to be a little bit more of the contact speed guy that they had expected? And then the rest of the guys, I mean, I think what Mike Yastrzemski is at this point. Lamont Wade, if you do the platoon right, he can be fine. But Tyler Fitzgerald had a really good year last year at shortstop. He's moving over to second base. Some of the metrics weren't quite as favorable to him, but I think watching him play a lot, I think he's one of those players who might just outperform the metrics. Just a lot of the things that he does just doesn't seem to translate metric wise. But I think he's a really good player. He could be a guy that could get 2020, if not more than that for them. He has some sneaky power and really good speed. So I think Fitzgerald's probably the guy that you look at to maybe take that ascension to the next kind of level to kind of help this team out of the guys that we have seen so far.
Yeah, Fitzgerald's definitely interesting. Moving over to second base, he played a lot of short last year.
Yeah.
That could boost his defensive numbers. I don't think he's going to put up a 130 WRC plus again, but if he puts up a 110 with a little bit better defensive numbers, he could get in that 2 to 3 WAR range again, and that would be a solid piece for them. So definitely interesting lineup. Most of their guys are projected to be above average hitters, but they're kind of in that, like, they don't really have a guy who's projected to be like an elite hitter, and that's kind of how this team's been for a while. So definitely interesting. The bench, not a ton to write home about. Prospects to know: Bryce Eldridge is definitely a prospect to know. He is currently ranked the number 26 prospect on Fangraphs. He put up a 137 WRC plus last year in the minors, across 4 levels, and that's very impressive for a 19-year-old, and he made it to AAA. So this is somebody that you very well could see at the big leagues this year as a 20-year-old, which would be very impressive. So we'll see. And he's obviously a first base only guy. So Wade isn't a bad player by any means, but you could obviously move Wade and DH him and platoon him with Flores, and then bring up Bryce Eldridge if he appears to be ready. And then Basabe and Luciano. Luciano's a former really high rated prospect who stock fell off a little bit. And Basabe is an interesting guy who was a pretty good prospect for the Tampa Bay Rays. And they brought him in the offseason, and he's an interesting player. He's supposed to have a really good hit tool. Hadn't really shown up, and didn't really show up that well in 2024. Dealt with some injuries, I believe, as well last year. So we'll see if he's able to contribute at the big league level in 2025. But any of those guys stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, Eldridge.
Yeah,
I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be a beast. From what I saw last year, he looks really good. So I hate it that the Giants are getting another good player, but I think Eldridge. I think he's going to definitely get into the major leagues this year, and
yep.
um, he's going to be a big time threat for years to come for this Giants team. And if one of these hitters don't hit the 30 home run threshold pretty soon, I think Eldridge could be that guy to
Yeah,
kind of
he'll be
maybe
the
break.
guy.
He'll be the guy to kind of break that streak if Chapman or Adamas don't do it soon.
Yeah, for sure. So moving on to the pitchers here. This is going to be an interesting topic, I believe,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of variation with a lot of these guys. There's high upside for it, but there's also some pretty low lows that could happen here. But there is one really consistent pitcher here, and that's Logan Webb. He has been very consistent for his first, I believe he's been in the big leagues like 5 years now, which is kind of crazy. He's been in the big leagues 6 years, which is hard to believe. So he is this guy who he throws tons of strikes. He gets ground balls. He strikes out a fairly decent amount of guys based off of based off of the type of pitcher he is. A lot of times these sinker ballers who are like 60% ground ball types are getting like, 6 strikeouts per nine or something. He's up usually between like 7.5 and 8. Um, and the metrics love him. He's been spectacular for them. 4 straight 4 WAR seasons, and I would not be surprised to see another one this year. So Logan Webb's incredible. Once you get past him, you've got 2 veterans, one a future Hall of Famer in Verlander. We talked about him a little bit. Then you also got Robbie Ray, who was there last year for part of the season. He had come back from Tommy John surgery, former Cy Young winner. We'll see. He's kind of got that variation like Verlander does, where you just don't know what you're going to get with him this year. He's obviously had the stuff at times, and he's a lot younger than Verlander, so you like that. But it's going to be interesting to see what he does. Jordan Hicks and Kyle Harrison are 2 more. Kyle Harrison, a former top prospect who came up and he held his own at the big league level last year. I think you can say. I don't think he was spectacular last year, but he was okay. And then Jordan Hicks had a um, had a very interesting year last year. He transitioned from being a 103-mile-per-hour throwing reliever to being a full-time starter last year, which went pretty well for him. He had a 4.10 ERA on the season, which isn't fantastic, but considering the transition to starting, it was pretty good. So
Yeah.
I guess out of those four, obviously Logan Webb is kind of his own thing. We kind of know what he is. Out of those four, which one do you think has the best chance of being that number two and really solidifying them? And which one do you just not believe in this year?
Yeah, I would say the best chance would probably be Robbie Ray. If you look at the advanced metrics last year, they looked really good for Robbie Ray. His expected batting average against was 180. Yeah, his average exit velocity was 86.8. Whiffs was 36%. Strikeout rate was 33%. Um, Obviously, he's going to come with his own fair share of walks, almost 12% of walks there. But um, I think he was coming back from the Tommy John surgery. It was his first game action. And he still looked pretty decent. Giving him another offseason, I think there's a chance Robbie Ray kind of gets back to a really good pitcher. And even with Jordan Hicks, I like him a lot too. He had a really, really good start as a starter. And then kind of as the innings started piling up, you could see it kind of wore him down a little bit. So now that he's had that under him, under his belt, I think the conditioning there can be a little bit better. Um, I really just think it's Verlander is the one you're kind of worried about. I mean, I think there's fair arguments to be worried about every pitcher on the list outside of Logan Webb. I think you can make an argument that every one of them, gets a little bit worrisome, but um, I do think they have some talent. It's just you don't know what you're going to get fully. Like, is Ray going to bounce back? Is Verlander going to be himself? Can Jordan Hicks fully translate to a starter? Can Kyle Harrison develop like people thought he would? I just there's a lot of question marks around the pitching staff that I just don't fully love. But if you tell me who's the one I think has the best chance, it's probably Robbie Ray.
Yeah, probably. And we'll go ahead and mention the prospects here as well. Um, Hayden Birdsong has some really good stuff. He struggled a little bit at the big league level last year, but he got a lot of whiffs too. So it'll be interesting to see if he can factor into that conversation. Mason Black also made it to the big leagues last year. He's an interesting prospect, and also I think we probably should mention Carson Wisenhunt as well as another very interesting prospect. He's broken to the top 100 this year for Fangraphs, and it'll be interesting to see if he's able to come up and make a contribution this year. But I guess we can move on and look at the bullpen a little bit here. This is a bullpen that's been one of the strengths of this team for the last few years. Um, I think the biggest question for me with this bullpen, you look at Ryan Walker, really good. Tyler Rogers is still really good. Camilo Doval, though, that's the real question here because Camilo Doval at times has been like almost an elite closer. Then at times he's been a very average to below average reliever. So, Damien, I guess I'll ask you about Camilo Doval. Do you believe in Camilo Doval this year, or do you think he's gonna be the 4.88 ERA guy from last year?
No, I mean I believe that he has a decent chance to bounce back. Sorry, I'm trying to get his if you look at his numbers
Yeah,
on his Statcast page, I mean, there's a lot
yeah.
to still like. I mean, obviously the walks are there, but he had a what 4.88 ERA last year. His expected ERA was 3.44. His expected batting average against was 187, which was in the 96th percentile in all of baseball. Um, he still gets 34% whiffs and a 28% strikeout rate. Like 60% ground ball rate still, even with all of that too. Like, I think Camilo Doval, honest, the walks are an issue, but I think he's still a damn good reliever. I was kind of hoping there was some talk that the Giants might trade him this offseason. I was kind of really hoping that would happen because I think he would get another shot somewhere else. And honestly, I just didn't want him still on the Giants because he still can be so dominant. But yeah, I like Camilo Doval for this year.
Yeah, I do too. I think he's going to bounce back to a certain level. I don't know if he's going to be the elite lockdown closer, but I think he's going
Yeah.
to bounce back to a certain level. The last few guys here, Eric Miller's good lefty for them. Has some really good projections actually for him. Sean Higeli is 6'11", which is interesting. I remember watching him in college. He had a pretty good, underrated year last year. He put up a 3.80 ERA. So that's an interesting one to watch. Lou Trevino's a long term. Um, Reliever. He used to be with Oakland, and he is what he is. He's a non-roster invite. These last few pieces of the pin here are not not that not that much. Randy Rodriguez, Tristan Beck are the other two here.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I really do like this bullpen, honestly. The back half of it is pretty good to me, especially in this ballpark. I think sometimes these guys are going to overperform what you would expect ERA wise with this ballpark too. So definitely going to be interesting to keep an eye on. But I guess we'll move on and talk about the season as a whole and what to expect. So their outlook in 2025 has an over/under win total of 80.5. So Damien, are you taking the over or under on that win total?
It's a really good number. Um,
Mhm.
I think we're going to be saying that a lot here moving forward in these previews, but um, I think I'm taking the under. Not by much. I think it's going to be right there 78, 79. Um, I just think that they have three better teams in this division, in my opinion. And trying to play those games all the time, I just don't I don't think it's they're going to take many of them. So I think that kind of is where the win total kind of takes a little bit more of a hit to it. I think they're a middle of the road team in the National League, so you're going to have some tough games throughout too. So I think I'm going under on the 80 and a half, but just barely.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do the same. I think I'm going to take the under on it. I just the starting pitching staff scares me here with Verlander, Ray. I don't know if I believe in Hicks repeating last year, and the prospects I think are interesting and have some upside, but they're not all going to hit. So we'll see. And then the offense, I just don't think this team's going to hit that well. I don't. There's
That's
some
fair.
guys who are expected to hit fairly well who their metrics didn't really line up with their performance last year. And then you've got guys like Matt Chapman and Willie Adames who have had a couple of really good years, but I don't know that they're going to keep playing like they have. I just have a feeling about those two guys, but we'll see. Hopefully they do perform better than that. But yeah, this team has an odds to make the postseason of plus 205, NL West plus 1800, and the World Series odds are plus 8,000. So not a team we're expecting to make the postseason, but they're certainly a team that could make it if some things go right. So, but I guess that'll wrap us up. Any final thoughts, Damien?
No, I think we've kind of hit over it very well. I mean, the Giants are going to be in a weird spot. They're going to have a lot of question marks to handle this year. Um, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how Bustrobosi handles his first in season, and what they look like at the deadline. And I think they do have a couple interesting pieces of far as guys who could potentially be moved if they fall out of a race. So that'll be pretty interesting to see. But not counting that, just saying it would be interesting to see what happens there. So
All right. Well, guess that'll do it for us. And don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. Appreciate y'all for tuning in and catch us on the next one. Thanks, guys.
thanks, everyone.